The certified letter trembled in my hands as I read the impossible number, $2 million. $2 million. For what the Willowbrook HOA called unauthorized agricultural operations and visual contamination of the community aesthetic. My crime? 3 hay bales sitting on my own property. Karen Pemberton's signature sprawled across the bottom like a declaration of war, her title HOA President and Compliance Director printed in bold beneath it. She had no idea that in exactly 72 hours, I'd be walking into her perfect suburban paradise with the power to turn her world upside down. The irony was delicious. While Karen thought she was crushing some naive rancher under her designer boot, she didn't know she was threatening the one person in Millfield County who could make her pristine HOA disappear with a single phone call. But I'm getting ahead of myself. This story started 6 months earlier when I made the mistake of thinking I could live peacefully among the manicured lawns and matching mailboxes of Willowbrook Estates. My name is Jake Morrison, and I've spent the last 15 years building my cattle ranch from nothing into the most profitable operation in 3 counties. When my lawyer recommended I diversify my investments, buying the corner lot in Willowbrook seemed smart. The 2.3-acre property sat at the development's edge, backing up to open farmland perfect for my plans. What I didn't plan for was Karen Pemberton. She appeared at my front door exactly 3 days after I moved in, clipboard in hand, wearing a smile that never reached her eyes. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she chirped, though her gaze was already scanning my property like a hawk searching for prey. "I'm Karen, your HOA president. We need to discuss some concerns." The concerns, apparently, were everything about me. My pickup truck was too commercial for the driveway. My plan to install a workshop was not in keeping with community standards. And absolutely, positively, under no circumstances could I store hay anywhere on my property. "This is a residential community, Mr. Morrison," she explained, her voice dripping with condescension. "We have standards to maintain, property values to protect." I kept my mouth shut about the county tax records I'd reviewed that morning. The ones showing Willowbrook's property values had actually declined 12% over the past 3 years. But Karen didn't need to know I'd done my homework. "I understand the rules," I replied calmly. "But my property backs up to agricultural land. 3 small hay bales for my horses hardly seen. No livestock," she cut me off. "No agricultural materials. No commercial activities. Period?" The way she said it, like she was addressing a particularly slow child, should have been my first warning about what kind of person I was dealing with. For the next month, I tried to play by Karen's rules. I parked my truck in the garage. I submitted architectural plans for my workshop plans that met every single HOA guideline down to the color of the screws. I even agreed to remove the small horse shelter I'd built, despite it being on my own property and completely invisible from the street. But Karen wasn't satisfied. She wanted complete surrender. The harassment started small. Violation notices for grass that was allegedly 1 inch too tall measured, I later discovered, by Karen herself with a ruler at 6 a.m. Citations for leaving my trash cans visible for more than 2 hours after pickup. A formal complaint because my outdoor light fixtures were brushed nickel instead of the approved polished chrome. Each violation came with escalating fines. $25 became $50. $50 became $100. The notices arrived with increasing frequency, sometimes daily, each one signed with Karen's flourishing signature and accompanied by timestamps showing when she'd personally documented my infractions. My neighbors started avoiding eye contact. Word was spreading that I was Karen's new target, and in Willowbrook, that made you radioactive. But the real war began when I found her trespassing on my property. I was coming home from the feed store when I spotted Karen's white Lexus SUV parked on the street, hazards flashing. She was marching around my backyard with her phone, taking pictures of everything: my workshop foundation, my garden tools, the 3 hay bales I'd moved behind my garage. "Excuse me," I called out, climbing over my own fence to reach her. "What are you doing on my property?" She spun around, phone still recording. "Documenting violations," she announced triumphantly. "This is it, Morrison. You've pushed too far this time." "Those are decorative hay bales," I said, though I knew how ridiculous it sounded. "For fall decoration." Her laugh was sharp as broken glass. "Decorative? Do you think I'm stupid? These are commercial agricultural materials, and they're staying on property under HOA jurisdiction." She held up her phone. "I have everything documented. Photos, timestamps, GPS coordinates. You're trespassing. I'm conducting an official HOA inspection under Section 4.7 of the Community Guidelines." She recited it like scripture. "Any property visible from common areas or neighboring lots is subject to compliance review." That's when she dropped the bomb that would change everything. "I'm calling an emergency board meeting," Karen announced, her eyes glittering with malicious joy. "We're going to discuss your complete removal from this community. And when we're done, you're going to wish you'd never heard of Willowbrook Estates." She climbed back into her Lexus and drove away, leaving me standing in my own backyard, wondering what I'd gotten myself into. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for Thursday at 7 p.m. in the community clubhouse. Karen made sure everyone knew about it. Flyers appeared on every door, posts went up on the neighborhood Facebook group, and phone calls went out to every homeowner. Emergency session addressing serious community violations and potential legal action. I arrived 10 minutes early to find the clubhouse packed. Karen had turned this into a spectacle, complete with a projector displaying blown-up photos of my property. My hay bales looked enormous on the screen, like agricultural monuments of defiance. "Ladies and gentlemen," Karen began, commanding the room like a prosecutor addressing a jury, "we face the most serious threat to our community's integrity in Willowbrook's 12-year history." She clicked through her slideshow, each photo more damning than the last in her twisted narrative. My workshop became unauthorized commercial construction. My truck became industrial equipment storage. And those 3 hay bales? They were the beginning of an illegal farming operation that will destroy our property values and turn Willowbrook into a barnyard. The crowd murmured approval. Karen had chosen her audience well: retirees and young professionals who'd bought into Willowbrook's promise of suburban perfection. The violation fines to date total $3,847. She continued, her voice rising with righteous indignation. But that's not enough. Not for this level of disrespect for our community standards. She clicked to her final slide, and my blood ran cold. "I'm recommending emergency action under Section 12.4 of our governing documents. Complete cessation of all activities, immediate removal of all violations, and punitive damages of $2 million for willful destruction of community aesthetic standards and property values." The room erupted in applause. $2 million. For hay bales? Karen's smile was pure poison as she looked directly at me. "Mr. Morrison, you have 48 hours to comply. After that, we begin legal proceedings." That's when I realized Karen had made a critical error. In her research on how to destroy me, she'd forgotten to research who I actually was. I walked out of that meeting in silence, letting Karen and her supporters celebrate their victory. Let them think they'd won. They had no idea what was coming. See, there was something about Jake Morrison that wasn't on any HOA application or neighborhood gossip chain. Something that would have made Karen think twice about declaring war on a man with 3 hay bales. For the past 8 years, I'd served on the Millfield County Board of Assessors. And for the last 4 years, I'd been the board's chairman. The same board that determined property tax assessments, reviewed tax exemptions, and most importantly decided which properties qualified for agricultural use classifications. Willowbrook Estates sat on 127 acres of prime farmland that had been reclassified for residential development back in 2011. But reclassifications weren't permanent. They could be reviewed, challenged, and potentially reversed if circumstances changed. Like if the county determined that residential development wasn't the highest and best use of the land anymore. I spent Friday morning in my office at the county courthouse, pulling files I hadn't looked at in years. The original agricultural assessment for the Willowbrook land showed it as class of farmland, the most productive and valuable agricultural classification in the county. The reclassification documents told an interesting story. Pemberton Development Company, yes, that Pemberton had petitioned for residential rezoning in 2011. The company was owned by Karen's father, Robert Pemberton, who developed Willowbrook as his final project before retirement. But here's what made it really interesting. The residential classification came with a specific provision. If the development ever fell below 85% occupancy for more than 2 consecutive years, the county could review the classification and potentially revert it to agricultural use. I pulled the current occupancy records. Willowbrook had been struggling. The economic downturn, declining property values, and Karen's increasingly hostile HOA management had driven residents away. Current occupancy was 67% and falling. Legally, the county could already move to reclassify Willowbrook back to agricultural use. But that would require a formal review process, public hearings, and months of bureaucratic machinery. Unless the board's chairman had documented evidence of the current residential use being detrimental to the community and county as a whole. Evidence like a rogue HOA attempting to levy impossible fines and creating a hostile environment that was driving away residents and damaging property values. Karen had just handed me the perfect justification to tear down everything she'd built. Saturday morning, I started making phone calls. The first call went to my lawyer, Sarah Chen, who'd been handling my legal affairs for over a decade. Sarah, I need you to research HOA fine limits under state law. Specifically, what constitutes excessive and punitive enforcement? How excessive are we talking about? She asked. $2 million for 3 hay bales. The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Jake, please tell me you're joking. Dead serious. And I need everything you can find about challenging HOA authority when they exceed their legal boundaries. My second call went to Tom Rodriguez, a private investigator who'd helped me with some property disputes in the past. Tom, I need a complete background check on Karen Pemberton and a financial audit of the Willowbrook HOA. Focus on any irregularities in fee collection, vendor relationships, or expenditures. How deep do you want me to dig? China deep. The third call was to my friend Mike Stevens, who wrote for the county newspaper. Mike, how would you like an exclusive on an HOA trying to fine a resident $2 million for decorative hay bales? Is this your situation? It's about to be everyone's problem. By noon, the machinery was in motion. Sarah was drafting legal challenges, Tom was pulling records, and Mike was researching similar HOA abuse cases statewide. But the most important call would wait until Monday morning. Karen didn't waste any time celebrating her victory. Saturday afternoon, she hand-delivered a follow-up notice to my door. The 48-hour deadline was now 36 hours, and she'd added new violations. Failure to respond appropriately to board directives and creating a hostile environment through non-compliance. The additional fines brought my total to $4,200, not counting the $2 million in punitive damages. Mr. Morrison, she said when I opened the door, her voice dripping with fake sympathy, I hope you understand this is nothing personal. But rules are rules, And this community has standards. I understand completely, I replied, keeping my voice neutral. You're absolutely right about standards. She blinked, clearly expecting more of a fight. Good. Then you'll have everything removed by tomorrow evening? I'll handle everything Monday morning. Karen's smile widened. Excellent. I'm so glad we could resolve this amicably. She turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Mr. Morrison? Don't think about lawyering up. Our HOA legal fund is quite substantial, and we've dealt with troublemakers before. I'm sure you have. After she left, I stood in my doorway for a long moment, watching her white Lexus disappear down the perfectly manicured street. Karen had made another mistake. She'd shown me exactly how confident she was in her power, which meant she wouldn't see the counterstrike coming until it was too late. Sunday, I spent the day preparing. I loaded those 3 hay bales into my truck and drove them back to the ranch. Let Karen think she'd won. Let her enjoy her moment of triumph. Monday morning would be a different story. Monday, 8 a.m. sharp, I walked into the Millfield County Administration building wearing my best suit and carrying a briefcase full of documentation. The security guard, Bill, had known me for years. Morning, Mr. Morrison. Big meeting today? You could say that, Bill. Emergency board session. I took the elevator to the 4th floor, where the Board of Assessors maintained offices. My secretary, Linda, looked up in surprise. Jake, I thought you were taking the week off. Change of plans. Is the conference room available? Of course. What's going on? We're going to review some property classifications that need immediate attention. I spent the next hour on the phone, calling the other 4 board members for an emergency session. By 10 a.m., we were all assembled in the conference room, reviewing the Willowbrook files. Gentlemen, I began, spreading out the occupancy reports and financial data Tom had compiled over the weekend. We have a situation that requires immediate intervention. Board member Carl Hendricks, a retired banker, whistled low as he reviewed the numbers. This is worse than I thought. They're down to 67% occupancy? And falling, I confirmed. But that's not the real problem. I distributed copies of Karen's violation notices and the $2 million fine demand. The HOA has gone rogue. They're attempting to levy fines that exceed their legal authority by several orders of magnitude. Board member Janet Foster, who'd been a real estate attorney before joining the county, shook her head in disbelief. This is insane. No HOA has the authority to fine residents $2 million for aesthetic violations. It gets worse, I continued, pulling out Tom's preliminary investigation report. The HOA president appears to be using enforcement actions to force out residents she considers undesirable. This is the 3rd family in 18 months to be hit with excessive fines. The room fell silent as they processed the implications. Jake, said board member Robert Kim, are you suggesting we should review Willowbrook's residential classification? I'm suggesting we have no choice. When residential development becomes so hostile and unstable that it's driving away residents and damaging the county's reputation, we have an obligation to consider whether that land might serve the community better under a different classification. Carl leaned forward. How long would reclassification take? Under normal circumstances, 6 to 8 months. But we have provisions for emergency reclassification when residential use becomes detrimental to county interests. I pulled out the relevant statutes. If we determine that current management is creating a public nuisance and damaging property values beyond the development itself, we can fast-track the review. What are you thinking? Janet asked, though I could see she was already following my logic. Immediate temporary suspension of the HOA's authority pending a full review. The county would assume direct oversight of common areas and facilities, while we evaluate whether residential development remains appropriate. The implications hit them all at once. Without HOA authority, Karen's fines would be meaningless. The $2 million demand would disappear. And during the review period, residents would be protected from further harassment while the county decided Willowbrook's fate. "I need a motion," I said formally. "So moved," Carl said immediately. "Second," Janet added. "All in favor?" 5 hands went up unanimously. Karen Pemberton had just lost her kingdom, and she didn't even know it yet. The paperwork was filed by noon. By 2 p.m., the county sheriff's office was serving official notices to the Willowbrook HOA board, informing them that their authority was suspended pending investigation and review. I wasn't there to see Karen receive her notice, but Mike Stevens was. He'd positioned himself across the street from the HOA office, camera ready, when Deputy Martinez knocked on the door. Mike called me 20 minutes later, barely able to contain his laughter. "Jake, you should have seen her face." She went from confused to angry to completely pale in about 30 seconds. She kept yelling something about illegal county overreach and demanding to speak to someone in charge. What did Martinez tell her? That she could file a formal appeal with the county, but until then, all HOA enforcement actions were void and residents were under county protection from harassment. Did she ask who initiated the review? Oh, that was the best part. When she demanded to know who was behind this, Martinez just handed her the paperwork with your signature as board chairman. I thought she was going to faint. Within an hour, Karen was calling my cell phone. I let it go to voicemail. Then she called again, and again. By 4 p.m., she'd left 6 increasingly frantic messages. I finally called her back at 5:30, just as I was leaving the county building. "Morrison," she screamed, before I could say hello. "What the hell have you done?" "I'm sorry, I don't understand the question." "You know exactly what I mean. The county has no right to interfere with HOA operations. This is private property." "Actually, Karen, it's not. Willowbrook sits on land that maintains county oversight for property classification and tax purposes. When residential developments become unstable or create public nuisances, the county has both the right and the obligation to intervene." Public nuisance? We're maintaining community standards. $2 million in fines for hay bales isn't maintaining standards, Karen. It's extortion. The line went quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was dangerously low. "You think you're clever, don't you? Using your little county job to get revenge because you couldn't follow simple rules. I think I'm protecting residents from illegal harassment by an organization that's exceeded its authority. This isn't over, Morrison. I'll fight this. I'll sue the county. I'll sue you personally. Karen," I interrupted gently, "I'd be very careful about threatening county officials. That could be construed as intimidation of public servants, which is a felony in the state." She hung up, but I knew this was just the beginning. Karen wasn't the type to surrender quietly, which meant the real fireworks were still to come. Tuesday morning brought the first wave of Karen's counterattack. She'd hired Clayton, Barrett & Associates, the most expensive law firm in the county, and they'd filed an injunction to block the county's suspension of HOA authority. The injunction was scheduled for an emergency hearing Wednesday afternoon. Karen was confident she'd found her path to victory. She had no idea I'd been expecting this move. Sarah Chen met me at the courthouse an hour before the hearing, carrying a briefcase that looked like it could stop bullets. "Are you ready for this?" she asked. "Born ready." "What do we have?" "Everything." She spread out documents across the table in the small conference room. Tom's investigation turned up some very interesting irregularities in HOA finances. Karen's been paying herself a $75,000 annual salary as compliance director, which isn't mentioned anywhere in the governing documents. That's just the start. She's also been awarding maintenance contracts to her brother's landscaping company at rates 40% above market value. And here's the kicker, she's been collecting emergency assessment fees from residents without proper board approval. I whistled. How much are we talking about? Over the past 3 years, approximately $180,000 in questionable expenditures and unauthorized fees. That's embezzlement. Potentially. And there's more. Sarah pulled out another stack of documents. Karen's been using HOA violation fines to fund personal legal expenses. That $2 million demand against you? The paperwork shows it was specifically calculated to cover the legal fees for her divorce proceedings. The pieces clicked into place. She's been using the HOA as her personal piggy bank. Exactly. And when residents started moving out because of her harassment, she needed bigger fines to maintain her income stream. This was even better than I'd hoped. Karen hadn't just exceeded her authority, she'd been stealing from her neighbors. Judge Morrison will be presiding, Sarah noted, then caught my expression. No relation, I assume. Third cousin on my mother's side. But he's absolutely fair, won't give me any special treatment. Good, because we won't need it. The courtroom was packed when we arrived. Karen sat at the plaintiff's table with 3 lawyers from Clayton, Barrett, and Associates, all looking supremely confident. Half the Willowbrook residents were there, most supporting Karen, though I noticed a few nodding respectfully in my direction. Judge Morrison called the session to order and immediately got down to business. This is an emergency hearing regarding the county's suspension of HOA authority at Willowbrook Estates. Mr. Clayton, you may present your argument. James Clayton, the senior partner, rose smoothly. He was exactly what you'd expect from a $500 an hour attorney, silver hair, expensive suit, and a voice that commanded attention. Your Honor, this is a clear case of government overreach. The county has violated private property rights and interfered with legally established homeowner association governance without due process or proper justification. He spent 20 minutes outlining the sanctity of HOA authority, the importance of property rights, and the county's supposed violation of established procedures. Furthermore, Clayton concluded, this action appears to be motivated by personal animosity. Mr. Morrison, who serves as board chairman, was the target of legitimate HOA enforcement actions before mysteriously initiating this county review. Judge Morrison looked at me. Mr. Morrison, you may respond. I stood, leaving Sarah's briefcase closed. Your Honor, I'll keep this simple. Mr. Clayton is correct that this case involves violations of property rights and improper use of authority. But he's wrong about who's doing the violating. I walked to the evidence table and picked up a single document, Karen's $2 million fine notice. The plaintiff, HOA, attempted to fine a county resident $2 million for storing 3 hay bales on his own property. This exceeds their legal authority by approximately 40,000%. A murmur went through the courtroom. Even Clayton looked surprised by the number. The county acted to protect residents from illegal harassment and extortive fines that no HOA has the authority to levy. We didn't violate anyone's rights. We protected them. Judge Morrison leaned forward. Mr. Morrison, can you explain the legal basis for the $2 million fine? I turned to look directly at Karen. Your Honor, I suggest you ask the plaintiff. I'd love to hear the legal justification myself. Clayton whispered frantically with his associates, then stood. Your Honor, the specific amount reflects the serious nature of the violations and the defendant's continued refusal to comply with community standards. That's not a legal justification, Counselor. What statute or regulation gives an HOA the authority to levy $2 million in fines for aesthetic violations? Clayton's confidence cracked. The HOA governing documents provide broad authority for enforcement actions. Show me where. For the next 10 minutes, Clayton shuffled through documents, looking increasingly desperate. Finally, he had to admit what we all knew: no such authority existed. In that case, Judge Morrison said dryly, the county's emergency action appears not only justified, but necessary to protect residents from illegal harassment. Karen jumped up from her seat. Your Honor, this is outrageous. That man is using his county position to get revenge because he couldn't follow simple rules. Mrs. Pemberton, the judge said sharply, you will remain seated or be removed from my courtroom. But Karen was past caring about courtroom decorum. He's corrupt. This whole thing is corruption. That's when Sarah stood up. Your Honor, if Mrs. Pemberton wants to discuss corruption, we have some documents that might interest her. She opened her briefcase and pulled out Tom's investigation report. The county's review revealed significant financial irregularities in HOA operations, including unauthorized salary payments to Ms. Pemberton, questionable vendor relationships, and the apparent use of fine revenue to fund personal expenses. Karen's face went white. Clayton looked like he wanted to disappear under the table. How significant? Judge Morrison asked. Approximately $180,000 over 3 years, Your Honor. The county has referred the matter to the district attorney's office for potential criminal investigation. The courtroom erupted. Karen was screaming about conspiracies and corruption. Residents were shouting questions, and Clayton was trying to restore order while clearly reconsidering his life choices. Judge Morrison banged his gavel repeatedly. Order, order in my courtroom. When the chaos finally settled, his ruling was swift and decisive. The plaintiff's injunction is denied. The county's emergency action is upheld pending full investigation. Mrs. Pemberton, I strongly advise you to obtain separate legal counsel for the criminal matter. Karen stared at him in shock, then at me, then back at the judge. This isn't over, she whispered, but the fight had gone out of her voice. Actually, it was over. She just didn't realize it yet. The story broke in the county newspaper that evening. Mike Stevens had crafted it perfectly. HOA president attempted $2 M fine. County investigation reveals financial irregularities. By Thursday morning, it had been picked up by the state wire services. By Friday, it was national news. Corrupt HOA president tried to fine rancher $2 million for hay bales was trending on social media. Karen became the face of everything people hated about HOA's petty tyranny, abuse of power, and corruption. The memes were merciless. Late-night comedy shows were making jokes about $2 million hay. Property lawyers were using her case as an example of what not to do. But the real consequences were just beginning. District Attorney Michael Foster, no relation to board member Janet, opened a formal investigation into HOA finances on Friday. By Monday, they'd frozen all HOA accounts and issued subpoenas for 3 years of financial records. Karen's brother's landscaping company was suddenly under investigation for bid rigging. The law firm that had been helping her structure the questionable fees was reviewing all their HOA clients for similar issues. And Karen herself was facing potential charges for embezzlement, fraud, and abuse of fiduciary duty. The Willowbrook residents who'd supported her began distancing themselves quickly. Nobody wanted to be associated with someone who'd been stealing from the neighborhood fund while harassing residents with illegal fines. But the most satisfying moment came on Tuesday afternoon. I was working in my shop, the same shop Karen had tried to block with violation notices, when a familiar white Lexus SUV pulled into my driveway. Karen got out slowly, looking like she'd aged 5 years in the past week. Gone was the perfectly styled hair and crisp professional clothes. She looked tired, defeated, and smaller somehow. She walked to my shop door, but didn't enter, just stood there, looking at me, working on a piece of custom furniture for my ranch. "You destroyed my life," she said quietly. I set down my tools and looked at her. "No, Karen. You destroyed your own life. I just stopped you from destroying mine. I was trying to protect property values, maintain standards. You were stealing from your neighbors and using HOA authority to fund personal expenses. That's not protecting anything, it's theft." She was quiet for a long moment. "The district attorney says I could go to prison. That's between you and the courts. My husband left me. The kids won't talk to me. I had to sell the house to pay for lawyers." I wanted to feel sorry for her, but I couldn't forget the satisfaction in her voice when she'd announced that $2 million fine. The joy she'd taken in trying to destroy me. "Karen, you made a choice. You could have been a fair HOA president who enforced reasonable rules reasonably. Instead, you became a tyrant who abused power and stole money. These consequences are the result of your choices, not mine." She nodded slowly, tears starting to fall. "I know. I thought I could control everything. Make everything perfect." "Perfect for who? You drove away half your neighbors with harassment and illegal fines." "I was trying to build something beautiful." "You can't build anything beautiful on a foundation of cruelty and theft." She stood there for another minute, then turned and walked back to her car. As she was getting in, she looked back at me one last time. "For what it's worth," she said, "I'm sorry." I watched her drive away, knowing it would probably be the last time I ever saw Karen Pemberton. 3 months later, the transformation was complete. Karen pled guilty to embezzlement and fraud charges. She received 2 years in prison and 5 years of probation, plus full restitution to the HOA. Her brother's landscaping company was banned from county contracts, and the law firm paid a substantial fine for their role in the scheme. The county's review of Willowbrook's classification concluded that residential development remained appropriate, but with significant changes. A new HOA board was elected, with strict oversight requirements and transparent financial reporting. Reasonable fine limits were established, and all violation procedures were reviewed by county legal staff. Property values, which had declined under Karen's reign of terror, began recovering as word spread that Willowbrook was under new, fair management. Most satisfying of all, new residents began moving in attracted by the large lots, beautiful common areas, and the promise of reasonable HOA governance. I kept my workshop, installed my horse shelter, and yes, I occasionally store hay bales on my property when needed for the ranch. The new HOA board doesn't mind, especially since I've volunteered my time to help them establish proper financial controls and governance procedures. The 3 hay bales that started this whole mess? I donated them to a local petting zoo, where they're used for children to play on. Sometimes I drive by and watch kids climbing on them, thinking about how Karen tried to turn those simple bales into a $2 million crime. But the real victory wasn't just stopping Karen or getting revenge for her harassment. It was showing that sometimes, when petty tyrants abuse their power, the system actually works to protect people. The county board's intervention saved not just me, but every resident of Willowbrook from further abuse. Karen's financial crimes would have continued until she'd bled the community dry, driving away more families and destroying the neighborhood she claimed to be protecting. Instead, Willowbrook became a model for how HOA should operate with transparency, fairness, and respect for residents' rights. I still serve on the county board, though I'm more careful now about potential conflicts of interest. Sarah Chen keeps me updated on new HOA abuse cases that cross her desk, and I've helped several residents navigate similar situations before they reached crisis levels. Tom Rodriguez now specializes in HOA investigations, having built a reputation after the Willowbrook case. He tells me business is booming, which is both encouraging and depressing. And Mike Stevens won a state journalism award for his coverage of the case, particularly his follow-up series on HOA abuse statewide. Turns out, Karen wasn't unique. She was just one of many small-scale dictators hiding behind community standards and property values. 6 months after the trial, I got an unexpected letter. Not a legal document or county correspondence, but a handwritten note from someone named Maria Gonzalez. "Mr. Morrison," it read, "my family just moved into Willowbrook, and we heard the story about what you did to stop the corrupt HOA president. Thank you. We bought our house specifically because we knew it was now a community where residents' rights are protected. Our children love playing in the common areas, and we feel safe knowing the HOA board is fair and transparent. P.E.S. My husband is a hay farmer, and he says your 3 bales were excellent quality. He hopes someday to supply hay that ends up as important as yours did." I framed that letter and hung it in my shop, right next to the photo of those 3 infamous hay bales. Sometimes the best victories aren't about getting revenge, they're about making sure the next person doesn't have to fight the same battle you did. These days, when I drive through Willowbrook, I see children playing in yards, families walking their dogs, and neighbors actually talking to each other instead of hiding from HOA violations. The community Karen tried to build through fear and control had finally become the community she claimed to want, just not the way she'd imagined. Every once in a while, someone new to the neighborhood recognizes me and thanks me for standing up to the system. But they don't understand I didn't fight the system. I used the system the way it was designed to work, to protect people from abuse of power. The real lesson isn't that you need to be a county official to fight back against tyrants like Karen. The real lesson is that most bullies are weaker than they appear, and when you stand up to them with truth and evidence, they usually crumble faster than you'd expect. Karen thought she had absolute power over Willowbrook because nobody had ever challenged her. She thought I was just another victim she could intimidate and crush. She never bothered to find out who she was really dealing with. And that mistake cost her everything. But here's the thing about stories like this. They're not really about revenge. They're about justice, about standing up for yourself and your neighbors when someone abuses their power, about using the tools available to you to protect your community from people who would destroy it for their own benefit. Karen Pemberton tried to fine me $2 million for 3 hay bales. Instead, she lost her house, her marriage, her freedom, and her community. Sometimes, karma needs a little help from the county tax office.